I'm using a Tamiya brown panel liner, which I find is a good start point for green cockpit interiors. And as always, I am not going to use the brush supplied for putting this down because I think it's just way too big, and the number of accidents I've had because of product going up inside this extendable brush holder don't bear thinking about, so I don't do it anymore. That'll do for now. We can always get more. I do tend to overdo things. Right, so we're going to start by doing this quite liberally. So a fairly wide brush will do. This is a number 2. As you can see, it's well worn and it's great for little projects like this. And we're going to start with the interior on the fuselage halves. So just a little bit of product on there, and we'll start with this area at the back. So we won't see much in here, so we don't need to worry too much. So we just give it a liberal coat and let it settle where it wants to settle. Making sure we've covered everything. There you go. And we'll just let that dry off, and that'll do. That'll do for that. We don't need to do any chipping or scuffing or anything like that, because you're only going to see it through tiny little slot at the back where there's a wheel in, so you might probably not see into it at all. So we put a little bit too much on there, but never mind. We can redistribute that a little bit. Right, so same process. Just going to, again, we have a bull turret in here, so you're not going to see much, but just for completeness, I'm just going to put some down. And then we're going to work all of this interior with it. Now don't worry if you think that's a little bit heavy-handed. It's an an enamel-based paint, so we can go in and clean this up anyway. I'm just taking some of that out. There we go. Now we brush painted this deliberately to give us an uneven green, and you can see how that's going to help us now. As we put the weathering down, it's giving us lots of different depth in the colour saturation behind the weathering. So yeah. Now bear in mind that this is Bombay underneath here, but we still want to do that, but the weathering of that area might be different. I've not got my head into what we need to do with that yet. Making sure that you get it in all the recesses. There we go. So that is starting to dry off now. I can still see it's wet, but it's starting to dry off. So before we go any further, what I want to do is just give it a little bit of a wipe in certain areas. I'm not going to bother with that. I'm just going to let that dry as it is. And that will just take it out of the areas between these ribs. So it looks more like something that's collected. And it takes it off the high points as well. There we go. And then just keep your eye out for any areas you might have missed. Make sure you've got it right into the recesses, because it'll look odd if you haven't. There we go. Right, so that's that done. I'm going to get the other one done, and then I'll come back to you when we do that, which is a similar process. Right, fuselage halves done. This next process is pretty much the same, only we want to take a little bit more care in certain areas. So in this back area here, we can be nice and liberal as we have been before, and just paste it all over everything. But what you need to be a little bit more mindful of is direction and how the dirt will accumulate naturally. Like I say, don't worry too much about it, but just have it in mind, because we are going to tidy all this up. Okay, so when we get to this area here, we're going to do the bulkheads, the floor, making sure that everything is covered. I am going to do the chair because it's a nice contrast on that 62 leather colour. Make sure you've got no drips or runs, just keep working the paint until you've got nice even coverage and collection in the right places. And we're going to do the table, but again, think about direction. And then the opening, and we need to do this support that goes round, and then we are going to just gently go over the radio set. And we've got a nice area at the back here that's got lots of detail, and we need to make that all pop out. The seat, and you want to do this before you put any seat harnesses on, if that's what you're going to do. Okay, I think I am happy with that now. So now that's done, I'm going to just have a quick clean up, and we're just letting that dry for a moment, and then we can decide how we're going to correct that and make that sort of sit right and look right. You're not going to see this bit, but just for completeness. Right, we are now ready to tidy this up and make it look the way we want it to look. And this is a personal preference thing here, how you weather the interior. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you my process, and you can take from that what you like. I'm using white spirit because the panel liner that we've used is an enamel. So white spirit is a good, cheap and effective way of cleaning that up. It's odour free, which is helpful. So we're going to have 2 puddles of this, one for cleaning the brush and one that we're going to keep as clean as possible. And got a couple of different swabs here and a brush, and the main method I'm going to use is brush. So what we will do is just go in with a damp brush, so that's all we need. I mean, that's quite wet, so just dab it on there, and anything that we think doesn't look right or we don't like the look of, we can just take it back with the white spirit, like so. So because this is an enamel paint, we can manipulate it, we can move it around, we can dress it back into the back there. You can see how much we've already got on the brush. And while this area is still damp, you can still work with it. So I'm just going to take that back, clean that up, and then I'm just going to go over it and put some streaks back into it. So you can see the difference that you can make. So what I want to do is just clean the centres down a little bit, just work them out a little bit, and get the sort of the grime to act like shadow and be collected in the areas around the edges. But I don't mind if I've got a little bit in the centre, because, you know, that just adds to the ununiformity of the finish, which is something that's quite important in my mind, that nothing looks like it's sort of not natural. So there we go. So some of these areas here, we've just got too much on and we want to trim it back. But leave some of your raised areas, because what we'll do lastly is we'll dry brush over it, and that'll highlight all the edges anyway, so that the dirt build up on the raised edges is really helpful for balancing that process. So the most important area to actually do is the cockpit area, but because this is a big area, it's easier for you to see on camera. So I'll just take off some of that paint. So I'm using this smaller puddle, which is sort of my dirty puddle, if you like. And what I'm going to do here is just take that back a little bit and make it more streaky. So sort of in the direction that I'd have expected the muck to behave. There we go. And we can let that collect at the bottom there. The same here, we just I've got a hair there, so we can lift that out. But you must feather it all in and make sure that you don't have tide marks and stuff where you've been cleaning up and manipulating. And then when it's dried, if you're not happy with it, you just repeat the process. Keep cleaning your brush. And you'll be surprised how much depth it adds to the look. Now, I'm not going to do that with the Bombay. I'm going to leave the Bombay more heavily weathered. I'm not sure how much of this we'll see, but we'll do it anyway. And then if something can be seen which you weren't expecting, at least you've covered it off. There we go. Okay, with our wash cleaned up, we've now got that exactly where we want it, highlighting the bits that we want. So the next thing that I want to do is just give that a dry brush. So we're going to use a dry brushing brush for that, which is the best method of doing it. If you've not got a dry brushing brush, then a flat brush is your next best option. So we're going to use the same green that we used for the cockpit painting, but we need to just lighten it a little bit. Some people will put white in, and I have done that in the past, but it's actually better if you use a similar colour, so a paler version of the colour that you've got, or put a little bit of, like what I'm doing here is I'm putting some cream white in, so something that's off-white or a very pale yellow or something like that, so that you keep the integrity of the original colour, but you bring it down a notch. So there you go. Because we're highlighting, we want it to be a lighter colour, and that's going to help, because what we've done when we've put the wash on and covered everything in a wash, we've actually darkened it a little bit. So you could, if you wanted, go through 2 stages, doing the original colour and restoring it, and then doing a lighter colour, which acts as either scuffs and scratches or just further highlighting it. But again, because of the scale, I'm keeping it a little bit simple, and we're just going to deal with one paler colour. Right, so the trick to dry brushing is to have almost no paint on your brush. So this is quite a liquid paint. You can see we've not thinned it. It's not thick though. So we'll take paint from the edges where it's starting to already dry out, and then we'll wipe as much as we can off, and then we can go in and we can start to highlight that a little bit. So if we start here, this will be easiest area for you to see. Just lightly, I'm not pressing on at all, I'm just lightly going to drag over that, both directions. There we go, and you can see that just lightens it up a little bit. And if you're not happy with it, you can take it back, but there you go. So we'll do the same in the there we go, in this side as well. Just highlight, there's a little bit of detail in there. So again, we're not pressing, we're just lightly passing it over. We're not putting any pressure on at all. Okay, that's good. So we can now carry on that process, and just all the raised details can get gently brought to life. It's really important when you put some paint on your brush that you take it straight off again. Get it to a point where there's nothing coming out on the paper, but you can see there's still paint on there. There we go. That is effectively done. Like I say, it's subtle, but you can see the difference. It has made it pop out compared to that one. Right, I'll carry on and get this done, and then I'll come back to you. Well, the next task is to get the glazing into its recess on the inside. So I've just nicked it off, and I'm just going to tidy up that edge just to make sure that there's nothing preventing the fit of this. and it's worth just double checking the opening and making sure there's no paint or anything that's got in there that might cause us a problem as well. So I'm going to fix this in using ultra glue. I'm not a massive fan of this product, but I've got it, so I might as well use it. One good thing about this glue is it's very easy to manipulate and move about and get it where you want it before you place your product. Did I just say product? I meant part. Okay. Now you can feel it slot into place. Fit is nice and positive. There we go, and we'll just clean up the glue from the inside there. There we go, so that's our glazing in, so that's going to allow us now to get to step 17, which is inserting the interior that's all nicely dry brushed up into the fuselage. Now you could carry on, you could do some chipping with a pencil and things like that, but again, because of the scale and how much of this will be seen, I'm just going to stop there. If you want to see me do a much fuller process, then have a look at my Anson build, where we went into a lot of effort with the weathering there, or you can have a look at my Walrus Silver Wings video where we did something similar. So we get our fuselage half and plop the wing spars through their little location slots, and that pushes that in. So we've got a bit of play at this end here where you can see we need to just pinch that in, and that is to get the desk in position. So before we sort of glue everything in place, I want to just dry fit both fuselage halves. Final dry fit. So back end seems to fit really nicely. Front end we're going to have to bring together. This looks okay. We're going to have to, starts flaring out from about this point here, and this side seems to be worse than the other. So that might vary on different kits. So we can bring the top together, and that all looks nice and feels actually quite smooth. Always looks a bit more dramatic when you've got paint on the inside joint. And then there we go. That brings those halves together, and that table is then just rested nicely in that recess. So we don't actually need to glue this into the fuselage because the fuselage is going to clamp it in place. So my thought process is we're just going to glue the fuselage halves together. Yeah. Now there's a little corner here, just in this area here, where the inside piece makes contact with that edge, and there isn't a fit problem, but it's a nice place just because it's totally hidden. It's a nice place just to put a little bit of glue in. But I'm going to start by fixing this together at the tail end and moving forward. So let's take that half off, and we can get some glue down on sort of this area here, these points here, and get us up to this bay. And then on here we want to put some glue down on there. But before we do that, I just want to clean up these edges and make sure we've got no paint interfering in the contact. So let's do that. Fuselage halves are together. There is a bit of clean up needed, but before we get to that, we've got some other bits and pieces to do. So we're now on step 23, and the next thing we need to do is add this piece, which fits in there. So I just want to dry fit that. There we go. Well, that fits in nicely, doesn't it? So we can glue that in. That then allows us to look at filling, which there will be a little bit on this part. I just want to push that over a little bit and make it centralised. There's a little bit of slack in it, so you've got to make sure that otherwise you're going to have a step and it'll be really difficult to sand that flush. There, that looks okay. So I don't want to mess with it while the glue's drying. We'll just let the glue do its thing. If you mess with it too much, you can start just making a mess, basically. Right, so that's step 23 done. So step 24 and 25 focus on the internal bulkheads inside the bomb bay there. So let's have a look at those. So they are on sprue E. So E2 and E8, which are these two parts here, which have some nice details on them, E2 and E8. So we'll give them a quick clean up and fit those. Right, so this is part 8, and that's going in this back end here. Well, that fits lovely now that we've done that. So we can glue that in. I just want to pinch that together a little bit. So we haven't glued along this inside line because I wanted to put the two bulkheads in first and see how that came together. So I'm just going to pinch that for a sec. Got the other bulkhead in, same process as you just watched me do. So now what I want to do is just bring these two sides in a little bit, which is, because you can see we've got a little bit of a gap. I just want to close that up a little bit. So I'm going to try and just clamp that down, pinch it in, and so that when you're looking up into the bomb bay, you don't see that gap. There we go. That seems to have got rid of the gap on this side and has significantly closed it on the other side, but not fully got rid of it, I don't think. It's a little hard to see, but now it's closed. I'm going to just run some glue into that gap, or that joint I should say, and I need actually this one because it's longer. And we'll just leave that clamped for a couple of hours, let the glue harden and take up the pressure of bonding it together, and then we can come back. So that is as far as I can get with that build for now. Let's just have a quick look where we're up to with the instructions. We've just done 24, 25. We've already done the wings and built the wings up, so we can take that out. We've got a little bit of detail painting to do because all we've done is prime. So we are ready to put the wings on. Already put the flaps in, so we can get rid of that. We've built up that and that, and they're not installed yet. We could do that, but I want to do that probably after I've sanded the fuselage centre down. So we have done that step, that step, that step, and that step, and that step. So we're at building up the landing gear next, which interestingly is also in the 78 colour. And you build up the internal frame before you put the cowling on. So we'll have a look at that because we've got to keep our mind on our painting. Right, okay. So once we've got that on, we can put the air scoop on. And then we've got this that we can be doing. Right, okay. Might skip that and come back to that and do that separately, because it'll be, well, I suppose it needs to be on for painting. Let's just check that, whether the camouflage goes over cowling or not. Yeah, it does. So we need to make sure that the cowling is on, so we do need to go through that process. Then we've got clear parts. Then we've got Bombay doors, so we want to clean them up so we can paint them at the same time we do underneath the fuselage. And we've got a part to modify so that we can do the torpedo. Right, okay, it's quite a bit to do yet, isn't there? But we are effectively at putting the wings on next. So that's going to take a little bit of time to dry, so I'll come back to you when we're ready to move on. Right, we have successfully been able to close the gap up, and that's looking really good there now. So as I look at this now that we've got this built up, there isn't really any gaps. I've got no filling to do whatsoever. So that's really nice, because what I've got to concentrate on now is just sanding. So I have a little bit of a step here and here. So that's me not lining it up as well as I thought I had when we were clamping. Or maybe it slipped in the clamp and I didn't notice. So we've got a little bit of sanding to do, which means ultimately we'll have to put some panel lines back in as well. So let's have a look at that to start with. So what we're going to do, get my sanding sticks out. So we're going to start the process with, I think we're probably best with a 400. I'm using a sponge, and we're just going to do the back edge here where we've got a bit of a lip, and I'm only pressing lightly. I'll just take that down a little bit. So we're just roughing that out. And then the same along this edge. Okay, and then as I look along here, I don't see that we've got an issue there. And then on this top edge, we definitely do so. So I'm not pressing on, I'm just dragging it backwards and forwards and letting it do its thing. And that's taken that down quite nicely. No need to do it at the top, in this grade at least. Okay, time for the flexi files. So the great thing about flexi files is that they you can put pressure on without deforming the shape and creating a flat, whereas with the best will in the world, most sanding sticks will. So on this top here where we're okay, I just want to blend it a little bit. So just simply going along the edge of it and making sure it's nicely rounded, and then we can drop down. The only disadvantage of a flexi file really is it's more difficult because of the frame to go in different directions, which is my usual way of working. So what I tend to do is as I drop down the grit, I sort of go in between. So we'll now get a sponge, this is an 800, and go in the opposite way and take some of that sanding marks out. and then we're going to go in with a lesser grit again on the flexi file and just make sure that that shape is still conforming. So that feels smooth. So what I'm going to do now is just take a 500 grit and just buff that out a little bit. Yeah. Okay, and then we can go in the opposite direction with a 2500. And then finally with the 4000 we can just polish that up. There we go. And you would never know that that was ever a glued joint. So have to make sure that there is no witness left. So I'm going to go around and slowly do this all the way around, make sure that I'm happy that there is no evidence of a join. If there is, we can always do some filling, but I'm going to try and get away with no filling. Then we'll come back and have a look at putting the panel lines back in. Well, got my fuselage all tidied up now. I'm happy. We've got no visible joints. It's looking just as I want it, so cool. Before I forget, we need to install this. I painted up the little black on the handles and it got washed in the same brown wash that we used in there, so we can now fit that. So that is my next task. So let me just get my tweezers. Make sure we face it the right way. There's a sort of a front and a back to this. I had test fitted this before, so I know it's going to go in okay. There we go. So that looks pretty cool. Just check that that's straight. That looks better. That looks better. So that is now in. So our next job is to attach the wings. So the wings have also been cleaned up. Same process as we've followed with the fuselage. So all nicely done. And we can just plop that on, and on this side pop that on, and that fit is lovely. Really nice. There isn't much with modern tooled aircraft. They tend to use these wing spars, so you don't get the droop in the wings like you used to, but it's still worth checking it. So I'm going to put it on my little jig here. Right, so I think we can glue that in now. And what I'm noticing is, I don't know if that's picking up on the camera, let me bring it a bit closer. If we get it square and in at the front end here, we end up with a bigger gap at the back. And if we push it in at the back, we end up with a bit of a gap at the front. So means we're seesawing at the middle point here. I don't really want to take material out, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get it so I've got a slightly wide gap at the back and a nice tight gap at the front. Let's have a look at what that looks like underneath. Yeah, again, bit of a gap at the back, but that'll be easier to fill at the back than on the curve. Now let's have a look. It's the same problem on this wing as well. So the gap is smaller on this side. We are going to have to hold that together though. Right, let's get some glue into the joint. Go. I'm just going to hold that in place for a sec. Got a small bead of glue, which it's not a problem, we can just scrape that away. Right. Should be okay now. I just want to clamp a little joint at the back there. Yeah, that comes together nicely then. Right, and we can leave that there to dry, and then when that's drying set, we'll do the other side. Right, so we need to get the tail on now, and they're already made up and cleaned up, and then they're shaped so you can't get them the wrong way around, and the fit is really good. So let's get them in. I think I will have to put a little bit of just hairline crack filler in, so something like the Vallejo putty, which is really nice as a crack filler. Though I don't know, we may get away with it. Right, that's the first one in. The second one's going in. It's really nicely moulded because that is all part of the bottom, both sides, and then this little section is all you're putting on the top. So you get some really nice detail around the hinge. Much bigger gap for some reason on this side. I'm just having a look. Yeah, it all seems nice and square. Sometimes if it's rising up, that can create a gap. So you want to just make sure it's all straight. That looks right. Okay, and then this just rests on top, which is bothering me a little bit. I just spark glue around the hinges because that's pretty much the only contact points. So I'm going to stay holding that for a moment just to make sure that we we get a nice straight tail. Lovely. Right, I'm going to let that dry and we'll come back in a moment. Right, there's a part of this we just want to be wary of, and I just want to test fit it. But here where the ball turret is going to go in, this back frame, we have a part that's going to glue into that. And we're going to probably end up doing that, I would imagine, after the build. I'm not 100% sure yet. We might be able to put the ball turret in, mask all the glazing and paint it at the same time. It depends on how much gap there is. But in case we have to mask this area and paint the ball turret separately and drop it in after we've painted, which seems more realistic, but then we've got a little part that goes in there that has to go in after we've painted. And that's bothering me a little bit because I think we might have some filling to do. So you can't put this part in until the ball turret's in, because you won't be able to put the ball turret in with it there. But if I put this in, yeah, there you go. You can see we've got quite a gap there. So when you look at the parts, you can see they sort of have a heart shape and curve in. Now, if we sand this back, then this isn't going to be in the right place. So we are going to have to fill it, which means we're going to have to paint this with the ball turret in. Yeah. Okay, that's going to be interesting. Yeah, very interesting. It means that we will have to make sure that we paint with the ball turret in the position we want to display it, just in case we end up locking it into place with the paint. What I might do is have a go at putting the ball turret in, but this sort of comes around on each side, and I don't think you've got a chance of getting that ball turret in with that there, but we will see. So yeah, I just wanted to check that. It's always worth checking how things are going to fit a little bit ahead, because it helps you make those decisions on how this is all going to come together. And that is definitely a problem area, that. Right, but for now, the instructions, we're on step 35, are moving over to this area here and doing some of the landing gear. So we've got a number of parts that we've got to clean up. We've already done that bit, and we've already built the nacelles. So before we can install the nacelles, we need to put these bits in, and I think we're probably going to paint this area before we put those engine nacelles on, which we've already painted the inside of those anyway, so it's going to be more difficult to get in there and paint. This is probably for the wrong side. That feels better, especially with the landing gear in. So we've got a little bit of build and then a bit more painting, and then we can add those on. So a little bit of steps to do to get to that being ready for masking off, which ultimately is what we're doing with all of this, is we're building it up to a point where we can start painting it. So that said, I'm going to get the parts out and cleaned up, and then I'll come back to you when we're ready to assemble.
Hi, and thanks for watching. You can support the channel by hitting the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please consider the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you don't miss any content that I put out. Model Kit Stuff is a self-funded channel, and I don't do membership or Patreon or buy me a coffee. So if you'd like to further donate to the channel and ensure the cameras keep rolling and the content keeps coming, then you can consider making a donation through my PayPal. You will find a link to that in the text below. You enjoy your modelling, and I'll see you soon.